The banker's face turned pale the moment he inserted my old card into the machine. For a second, he said nothing. His hands began to shake. Then he said in a trembling voice, "Madam, please wait here," he whispered. I blinked at him in confusion. It was just an old card my father gave me years ago. I had almost forgotten it even existed. But the banker leaned over the screen again, his eyes wide like he had just seen a ghost. Then he slowly turned back to me and whispered something that made my heart stop. "Madam, do you know what you owned?" I sat there frozen because just 1 hour earlier, I had been a homeless 69-year-old woman sitting on a park bench with nothing but a suitcase. My husband had divorced me and he had taken everything. Or at least that is what he thought. My name is Eleanor Thorne. Most people call me Grandma Eleanor now. I bake pies for my grandchildren. I water the roses in my small garden. I sit on my porch and watch the sunset while drinking sweet tea. People think my life has always been peaceful. But they do not know the truths. They do not know how close I came to losing everything. And they definitely do not know what happened after that banker looked at my father's card. To understand how I ended up sitting in that bank chair, staring at a man who suddenly treated me like royalty. We have to go back to the day my husband decided I was worth nothing. That morning started like any other. The sun came through the kitchen window. I was making pancakes. My husband Arthur sat at the table reading the newspaper. Arthur Thorne was a respected man in our town. A successful businessman, sharp dresser, confident smile. But behind closed doors, Arthur had changed over the years. The man I married 40 years ago had slowly disappeared. "Eleanor," he said without looking up from the newspaper. "Yes, dear," I answered while flipping a pancake. "We need to talk." Those 4 words can make any wife nervous. I turned off the stove and walked over to the table. Arthur finally looked at me. But the look in his eyes was not the look of a husband speaking to his wife. It was the look of a man talking to a stranger. "I want a divorce," he said calmly. The room went silent. I laughed a little because I honestly thought it was a joke. "You are funny this morning, Arthur." But he did not laugh. "I am serious, Eleanor." My hand started to shake. 40 years of marriage. 2 children. A house we built together. And he said it like he was canceling a dentist appointment. "Why, Arthur?" "Because I want a different life." That was all he said. No apology. No explanation. Just a different life. Later that afternoon, I learned what that meant. My husband's mistress is named Chloe, 32 years old. She worked at Arthur's company. She had long blonde hair, perfect makeup, and a smile that always seemed a little fake. When she walked into our house that evening beside my husband, I felt something break inside my chest. Chloe looked around the house like she was inspecting a hotel room. "Nice place," she said. Arthur nodded proudly. "It will be ours soon." Then Arthur looked at me and said, "The divorce papers are ready. The house is in my name. The company is in my name. The investments are in my name. You will need to move out by the end of the week." The end of the week, 40 years of marriage, 7 days to disappear. I felt dizzy, but the worst part was not the house. It was my own children. My son Julian stood behind Arthur in the living room doorway. Julian did not look at me. He stared at the floor. "Mom, maybe this is for the best." Those words hurt more than the divorce. For the best. I raised you in this house. I packed your school lunches. I stayed awake every night when you were sick. And now you could not even look me in the eyes. My daughter Sarah cried softly but said nothing. Arthur cleared his throat. "Eleanor, please pack your things." Chloe walked past me toward the kitchen like she already owned the place. I stood there frozen. Then I quietly walked upstairs. I packed 1 suitcase, clothes, family photos, and a small wooden box my father gave me before he died. My father was a quiet man named Henry Miller. He worked hard his whole life, a mechanic, oil on his hands, grease on his boots, but his eyes were always kind. Before he passed away, he handed me that little wooden box. Inside it was a plain silver card. Use this only if you truly need it, he told me. I had never used it. Not once, because my father always said something else. Eleanor, money can protect you, but dignity protects your soul. So I kept the card hidden away all these years. And that night, as I closed my suitcase, I took the card out and looked at it. It was old. No bank names, no numbers printed on the front, just my name engraved in small letters. Eleanor Miller, my maiden names. I slipped the card into my purse just in case. Downstairs, Arthur was pouring wine for Chloe. They laughed together. Julian was scrolling on his phone. Sarah had already left the house. I carried my suitcase to the door. Arthur barely looked at me. Good luck, Eleanor. That was the last thing he said to the woman who had spent 40 years beside him. I stepped outside. The front door closed behind me. Just like that, I was homeless. The night air felt cold on my face. I walked down the street slowly until I reached the park. I sat on a wooden bench, my suitcase beside me, my hands trembling. For the first time in 40 years, I had no home, no husband, no plans, and very little money. I opened my purse. There were $32 inside. $32. I laughed a little. 40 years of marriage reduced to $32 and a park bench. That was when my hand touched the old silver card again. My father's card. I stared at it for a long time. Should I really use it? He had told me only to use it if I truly needed it. Well, Father, I whispered to the empty park. I think this counts. The next morning, I walked into the largest bank downtown. The building was huge. Marble floors, tall glass windows, men in expensive suits. I felt small walking through those doors, but I walked to the front desk anyway. Excuse me, I said softly. The young clerk looked at me politely. How can I help you, Mom? I took out the silver card. I would like to check the balance on this account. She frowned slightly. This card is unusual. She called a banker over. His name was Mr. Sterling. Tall man, gray hair, serious expression. He took the card carefully. Where did you get this, madam? My father gave it to me. Mr. Sterling nodded slowly. Please come with me. He led me into a private office. Then he inserted the card into a machine on his desk, and that was when everything changed. The screen flashed. Numbers appeared. Mr. Sterling leaned closer. Then closer. His face slowly drained of color. Madam, he whispered. I think you should sit down. I was already sitting. He swallowed hard. Madam, do you even know what you owned? My heart started pounding. What do you mean? Mr. Sterling turned the screen toward me, and when I saw the number on the account, I felt the world spin, because my father had not just left me money. He had left me something far bigger, something that could destroy my ex-husband's entire life. And just as I was trying to understand what I was looking at, Mr. Sterling said something that made my stomach drop. Madam, there is something else you need to know about this account. Something your father specifically requested we tell you. And what he said next changed everything. I stared at the screen for a long moment. At first, I thought I was reading the number wrong. My eyes felt blurry. My heart was beating so hard that I could hear it in my ears. Mr. Sterling slowly pushed the computer closer to me. Madam, please look carefully, he said gently. I leaned forward. There were more zeros than I had ever seen in my life. Millions, not 1 millions, many millions. My hands began to shake. There must be a mistake, I whispered. Mr. Sterling shook his head. No, madam, there is no mistake. This account has existed for over 30 years. It has grown through investments your father set up long ago. My father, the man who fixed old trucks and tractors for a living, the man who came home every evening with grease on his hands. How could he leave something like this? I looked at the screen again. The number was real. My father had left me a fortune. But before I could even understand what that meant, Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "Madam, there is something else your father asked the bank to do." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" He opened a small digital file on the screen. "Your father left instructions that if you ever use this card, we were to deliver a message to you." A message from my father? My chest suddenly felt tight. "Yes, madam. He recorded it many years ago." Mr. Sterling clicked a button. The speakers on the computer made a small sound. Then I heard a voice I had not heard in 25 years. Eleanor, my father's voice. Soft, calm, just like I remembered. My eyes filled with tears instantly. "If you are hearing this message," he continued, "then it means you finally needed help. I am sorry it had to come to that." My hands covered my mouth as tears rolled down my face. "Your mother and I always worried about you, Eleanor," he said. "You have a big heart. You trust people easily, sometimes too easily." Mr. Sterling quietly stepped out of the office to give me privacy. The recording continued. "The money in that account is yours, Eleanor. I created it for you a long time ago. But it is not just money. There are also shares in several companies. And there is one company in particular that you must understand very carefully." My breathing slowed. "Your husband Arthur works very hard," my father said in the recording. "But what Arthur does not know is that most of the company he works for was quietly purchased years ago through investment groups. Groups that are controlled by this account." My heart stopped. The company, Arthur's company, Thorn Manufacturing, the company he bragged about every single day. The company he said he built with his own hands. My father's voice continued, "If you are hearing this, it means something went very wrong in your marriage. I hoped it would never come to this. But if Arthur ever mistreats you, remember this truth. You are not the powerless one." The recording paused. I wiped my tears slowly. Then my father said the words that made my entire world tilt sideways. "Eleanor, through those shares, you quietly became the majority owner of Thorn Manufacturing many years ago." My breath stopped. Majority owner. That meant something very simple. The company Arthur kicked me out, the company he used to impress that young woman Chloe. The company he told everyone he controlled was actually mine. The recording ended with my father's final words. "Do not use this power for anger, Eleanor. Use it only if you must protect yourself. I love you." The recording stopped. The room was silent. Mr. Sterling returned a moment later. He looked at me carefully. "Are you all right, madam?" I nodded slowly, but my mind was spinning. "You are saying that I own Thorn Manufacturing?" Mr. Sterling folded his hands. "Yes, madam. Through holding companies and trust structures, but legally speaking, you control 51% of the shares." 51%. That meant something very important. Control. My husband thought the company belonged to him, but in reality, I could remove him whenever I wanted. My heart began to beat faster. For 40 years, I had been the quiet wife, the supportive partner, the woman who stayed home while Arthur built his empire. But the truth was something completely different. The empire had always been mine. Mr. Sterling leaned forward. "Madam, there are also several other assets attached to the account. Properties, investments, trust funds." He showed me another screen. My eyes widened again. Buildings, stocks, accounts. The fortune was far bigger than I imagined. And suddenly something inside me changed. Not anger, not exactly, something colder. Arthur had thrown me out with nothing. He had humiliated me. He had replaced me with someone half my age. And my own son had stood there and said nothing. But now I knew the truth. I was not the weak one. Mr. Sterling spoke carefully. Madam, may I ask something? Yes. Do you intend to take control of Thorn Manufacturing? I leaned back in the chair. The truth was simple. I did not know yet. Part of me wanted to walk away from everything, start a quiet life somewhere else. But then I remembered Chloe walking through my kitchen. Nice place. It will be ours soon. Ours. That word echoed in my mind. Mr. Sterling continued speaking. There is something else you should know. What? The board of directors at Thorn Manufacturing has been trying to schedule a meeting with the majority shareholder for years. They do not know who you are. The account was structured anonymously. But legally, they must follow instructions from whoever controls these shares, meaning you. My mind started to form a picture. Slowly, piece by piece. If I wanted to, I could walk into Arthur's company tomorrow and fire him. The idea felt unreal. But then another thought hit me. Mr. Sterling, I asked quietly. Does Arthur know about this? No, madam. According to the records, he believes the controlling shares belong to a group of overseas investors. I almost laughed. All these years, all those speeches about power, all that pride. And he never knew my father had protected me the entire time. Mr. Sterling stood up. Madam, if you would like, we can arrange a meeting with the board of Thorn Manufacturing. My heart beat faster, but I shook my head slowly. Not now. He looked surprised. No, I need a little time first. I stood up from the chair. For the first time in 2 days, I did not feel small. In fact, I felt something I had not felt in years. Strong. Mr. Sterling smiled slightly. Would you like to withdraw some money today? I nodded. Yes, that might be helpful. He prepared a temporary card for me. When he handed it over, he spoke respectfully. Madam, if there is anything our bank can do to assist you, please let us know. I thanked him and walked out of the bank. The sunlight outside felt brighter than before. Yesterday, I had been sitting on a park bench with $32. Today, I owned more money than I could fully understand. But the most important thing was not the money. It was the truth. Arthur Thorn had just made the biggest mistake of his life because he threw out the woman who secretly owned his entire company. I walked down the sidewalk slowly. Then I stopped. Across the street was a large electronic billboard and suddenly I saw something that made my stomach twist. A smiling photo of Arthur and Chloe. It was an advertisement for Thorn Manufacturing. Grand reopening celebration tonight hosted by CEO Arthur Thorn. The event was happening at the company headquarters, only 1 block away. And suddenly a strange idea formed in my mind. What if I went not as the wife he threw away, but as the owner he never knew existed? My heart began to beat faster. For 40 years I had lived quietly beside that man. Maybe it was time he finally met the real Eleanor Thorn. I turned and started walking toward the building, but I had no idea that inside that company office, Arthur was already planning something that could destroy everything my father had built. And someone in that building had just discovered my name. The Thorn Manufacturing building stood tall at the end of the street. I had walked past it many times before, but always as the CEO's wife. Today was different. Today I stood on the sidewalk looking up at the glass tower knowing something no one inside that building knew. I owned it. The thought still felt strange in my mind. Cars were pulling into the parking lot. Men in suits walked through the front doors. Large banners hung outside that read, Thorn Manufacturing Grand Expansion Celebration. Hosted by CEO Arthur Thorn. I almost laughed when I saw the word CEO. Arthur loved that title. He said it so proudly every time he introduced himself. But the truth was very simple. A CEO only has power if the owner allows it. And I was the owner. I held the small envelope Mr. Sterling gave me. Inside were documents proving that the investment group controlling Thorn Manufacturing was under my name. He told me I did not have to use them today, but if I needed them, they were there. I took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. The security guard by the door looked at me politely. "Good afternoon, madam." "Good afternoon." He opened the door without question. For 40 years, people had opened doors for me because I was Arthur Thorne's wife. Today, I walked through that door because I had something much stronger. Control. The lobby was busy. Employees were setting up decorations. Waiters carried trays of food. A large stage had been built for Arthur's speech. I saw Chloe standing near the front desk. She wore a sparkling red dress and high heels. Her hair was perfect. Her smile was bright. She looked like someone who believed she had won a grand prize. When she saw me, the smile disappeared. "Eleanor," her voice sounded shocked. I smiled politely. "Hello, Chloe." Several employees nearby began whispering. Everyone in the company knew Arthur had divorced me. Seeing me here clearly confused them. Chloe walked closer. "What are you doing here?" I tilted my head slightly. "I came to the celebration." Her eyes narrowed. "You were not invited." Before I could answer, a familiar voice came from behind her. "What's going on here?" We both turned. It was my son, Julian. He worked as operations manager at Thorne Manufacturing. Julian looked uncomfortable seeing me. "Mom, why are you here?" His voice was not angry, but it was not welcoming either. I looked at him carefully because I wanted to see something. Did my son feel any guilt at all? "I came to see the company," I said calmly. Chloe crossed her arms. "You should leave before Arthur sees you." But at that moment, the elevator doors opened and Arthur Thorne stepped out. He wore a dark blue suit, the kind he always wore for important events. When his eyes landed on me, he froze. "Eleanor." The room became quiet. Employees stopped moving. Waiters stopped walking. Everyone could feel the tension. I smiled gently. "Hello, Arthur." He walked closer, his face tight with irritation. "What are you doing here?" His voice was low but angry. "I thought I would come see your big celebration." Arthur looked around quickly. People were watching. He forced a smile for the crowd. "Eleanor, this is not appropriate. You should go home." I looked at him calmly. "I do not have a home, remember?" That made several employees shift uncomfortably. Arthur's jaw tightened. He leaned closer to me and whispered, "You are embarrassing yourself, please leave." For a moment, I considered it. Walking away, letting him continue believing he was the most powerful man in the room. But then Chloe spoke. "Maybe she came to beg," she said loudly. A few people laughed nervously. Chloe looked pleased with herself. "It must be hard losing everything at your age." My hand stayed calm at my side. But inside something cold was forming. I remembered my father's voice. "Do not use this power for anger. Use it only if you must protect yourself." I looked at Chloe and smiled. "You seem very confident," I said. "Of course she is," Arthur said quickly. "Chloe will soon be part of this company." "Part of the company." I nodded slowly. "That sounds interesting." Arthur turned toward the stage. "The guests are arriving. I do not have time for this." He looked back at me. "Security will escort you out if you do not leave." Julian said, "Mom, maybe it is better if you go." Those words hurt more than anything Chloe had said. My own son, asking me to leave a building I owned. I took a slow breath. "All right." I turned toward the door. Several employees looked relieved. Arthur relaxed slightly. Chloe smirked, but as I reached the door, I stopped because something caught my attention. Two men in expensive suits were walking through the lobby. I recognized them immediately. Board members, Mr. Vance and Mr. Rivers. They were part of Thorne Manufacturing's board of directors. Arthur quickly walked toward them. "Gentlemen, welcome." They shook his hand politely, but then Mr. Vance's eyes moved past Arthur. He looked directly at me. His expression suddenly changed. Mr. Rivers followed his gaze. Both men froze. Then something unexpected happened. They walked past Arthur, straight toward me. The entire lobby went silent. Mr. Vance spoke carefully. "Excuse me, ma'am. May I ask your name?" Arthur frowned. "Gentlemen, that is my ex-wife." Mr. Vance did not look at him. He kept his eyes on me. "Your name, please." For a moment, every person in the lobby was watching. Chloe, Arthur, Julian, employees, security guards. I slowly answered. Eleanor Thorne. The reaction was immediate. Mr. Vance's eyes widened. Mr. Rivers inhaled sharply. Arthur looked confused. "What is going on?" Mr. Vance straightened his suit. Then he said something that made the entire room freeze. "Ma'am, we have been trying to find you for years." Arthur blinked. "Find her?" Mr. Rivers nodded respectfully toward me. "Mrs. Thorne, or should we say majority shareholder?" The lobby exploded into whispers. Arthur turned pale. "What did you just say?" Mr. Vance looked directly at him. "Mr. Thorne, the majority owner of Thorne Manufacturing, has finally appeared." Arthur laughed nervously. "That is impossible. The shares belong to the investors group." Mr. Vance shook his head slowly. "No, sir. They belong to her." He pointed at me. "Eleanor Thorne, your ex-wife." The silence in the lobby became so heavy you could almost feel it. Chloe's mouth slowly opened. Julian looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. Arthur stared at me, his face losing color. "That is not possible." But Mr. Vance calmly opened a folder. "Actually, it is very possible. And according to the documents we just received from the bank this morning." He paused. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "Mrs. Thorne now controls 51% of Thorne Manufacturing." Arthur whispered one word. "No." But before anyone could speak again, Mr. Rivers looked at me respectfully. "Mrs. Thorne, there is an emergency board meeting scheduled upstairs. We would like you to attend." My heart beat slowly in my chest. For 40 years I had stood quietly beside that man. Today I stood in front of him, and for the first time Arthur Thorne looked afraid. But what none of them knew yet was that the board meeting upstairs was about to reveal something far worse than ownership. Something that could send Arthur Thorne to prison. The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than it really was. No one spoke. Mr. Vance stood beside me, holding a folder filled with documents. Mr. Rivers pressed the button for the executive floor. The elevator doors closed slowly, sealing us away from the shocked whispers still echoing in the lobby. Behind us, I could see Arthur through the glass walls of the elevator as the doors slid shut. He was still standing in the middle of the lobby, frozen. Chloe clutched his arm tightly. Julian looked pale. For the first time in 40 years, my husband had no idea what was happening around him. And I realized something strange. I did not feel anger. I felt something quieter. Clarity. The elevator reached the top floor. The doors opened to a wide hallway with thick carpets and large windows that looked over the entire city. I had been to this floor only once before, years ago, when Arthur first became CEO. Back then I felt small walking through those halls. Today was different. Mr. Vance gestured politely. "Right this way, Mrs. Thorne." Hearing my name felt strange and comforting at the same time. We entered a large boardroom with a long wooden table. Several board members were already seated. They all stood the moment I walked in. Some of them looked surprised. Some looked relieved. One elderly man smiled warmly. "It seems the mystery owner has finally arrived," he said. Mr. Vance closed the door behind us. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "this is Eleanor Thorne, the majority shareholder of Thorne Manufacturing." Everyone nodded respectfully. I sat slowly at the head of the table, unsure what to say. Mr. Rivers began speaking. "Mrs. Thorne, we apologize for the sudden situation downstairs, but your arrival today is extremely important." "Important? How?" He slid a thick file across the table. "Because Thorne Manufacturing has a serious problem." I opened the folder. Inside were financial reports, contracts, and printed emails. At first, the documents meant nothing to me, but then Mr. Vance spoke again. "Mr. Thorne has been making several business decisions over the last 3 years without full board approval." My stomach tightened. "What kind of decisions?" Mr. Rivers leaned forward. "Large financial transfers, risky investments, and partnerships with companies we do not fully trust." I looked back down at the documents. Numbers filled the pages. Huge numbers of millions of dollars moving in strange directions. I felt confused. Why would Arthur do this? Mr. Vance sighed. "That is exactly the question we have been asking." He flipped to another page. "Some of these transfers appear to be connected to offshore accounts." Offshore accounts? That sounded serious even to someone like me who had never run a company. Then the elderly board member spoke again. "Mrs. Thorne, we suspected something was wrong for quite some time. But since we could not contact the majority shareholder, our ability to stop Mr. Thorne was limited." I slowly understood. They needed the majority owner. They needed me. Mr. Rivers continued. "Earlier today, we received confirmation from the bank that you had activated the controlling account. That allowed us to call this emergency board meeting." My heart beat slowly. "So, what happens now?" Mr. Vance answered calmly. "Now you have the authority to investigate Mr. Thorne's decisions and if necessary." He paused. "You can remove him as CEO immediately." The room went quiet. 40 years of marriage, and now I held the power to end Arthur's career with a single sentence. I leaned back in the chair. My mind drifted back to the park bench from the night before. The cold wood under my hands, the $32 in my purse, the way Arthur closed the door behind me without even looking back. And then I thought about something else. My father, the quiet mechanic who somehow built a safety net around my life without telling me. He must have known something. Maybe he saw the kind of man Arthur was becoming. Maybe he was protecting me all along. Mr. Rivers spoke again. "Mrs. Thorne, there is something else we must show you." He turned the page to a set of printed emails. My eyes moved across the screen, and then I saw a name that made my chest tighten. Chloe Bennett, Chloe, Arthur's new girlfriend. The emails showed conversations between Chloe and a group of outside investors. They discussed Thorne Manufacturing. They discussed company shares, and one line made my stomach twist. "Once the divorce is complete, Arthur will have full control. Then we can move the remaining assets." I looked up slowly. "Are you telling me Chloe was involved in this?" Mr. Vance nodded. "We believe so. These emails suggest she encouraged Mr. Thorne to move company funds into risky investments." My hands rested quietly on the table. Chloe was not just a girlfriend. She was part of something bigger, something dangerous. The elderly board member spoke carefully. "Mrs. Thorne, if these transactions are illegal, it could bring government investigators into the company." Investigators? That meant police? That meant prison. I looked around the table. "What do you want me to do?" Mr. Rivers answered honestly. "We want you to protect the company, protect the employees, protect the investors, and if necessary." He looked directly at me. "Protect yourself." I took a deep breath. Then I asked the question that had been sitting quietly in my mind. "Where is Arthur right now?" Mr. Vance glanced toward the window, probably still downstairs trying to understand what happened. I nodded slowly. Then I said something that surprised even me. "Bring him up here." Several board members exchanged looks. "You want him here?" "Yes. If there are questions about his actions, he should answer them." Mr. Rivers pressed the intercom button on the table. "Please ask Mr. Thorne to come to the boardroom." We waited. No one spoke. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Finally, the door opened. Arthur walked in. But the confident man I had known for decades was gone. His face looked tight, his tie was crooked, and his eyes moved quickly around the room. He saw the board members. Then he saw me sitting at the head of the table, and for the first time since I met him 42 years ago, Arthur Thorne looked nervous. "What is going on here?" Mr. Vance spoke calmly. "Mr. Thorne, please sit down." Arthur did not move. He stared at me. "Eleanor, what is this?" I folded my hands gently on the table. "This is a board meeting, Arthur." His eyes narrowed. "You have no place here." Mr. Rivers slid a document toward him. "Actually, she does." Arthur looked at the paper. His face slowly turned pale again. "Majority shareholder." He whispered the words like they tasted bitter. "That is impossible." But no one laughed this time. Arthur's breathing grew heavier. "You think you can walk in here and take everything from me?" I looked at him quietly. "Arthur, I did not take anything from you. My father gave it to me long before you even became CEO." The room stayed silent. Then Mr. Vance opened the financial report. "Mr. Thorne, there are serious questions about several company transfers over the past 3 years." Arthur's eyes flashed. "Business decisions. That is all." Mr. Rivers slid the printed emails across the table, "Including your communication with outside investors through Ms. Bennett." Arthur froze for a moment. He said nothing. Then he laughed suddenly. "You people think you understand business, but what you do not understand is this company would not exist without me. I built it." Mr. Vance shook his head slowly. "You managed it. There is a difference." Arthur slammed his hand on the table. "You cannot remove me." But then I spoke. "Yes, we can." The room went silent again. Arthur slowly turned toward me. "Eleanor, you would not do that." His voice was softer now, almost pleading. 40 years together. You owe me that much." Those words made my chest tighten. For a moment, I saw the man I married. The young man who once fixed my broken car in the rain. The man who held my hand when our children were born. But that man was gone. The man standing in front of me was someone else. And then something happened that none of us expected. The boardroom door burst open. Chloe rushed inside. "Arthur, we need to leave right now." Everyone turned toward her. Chloe looked at me with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you just started." Mr. Vance stood up. "Ms. Bennett, this is a private board meeting." Chloe ignored him. She grabbed Arthur's arm. "They know everything." Arthur's face turned white. "What do you mean?" Chloe's voice shook. "The federal investigators are here." Every head in the room turned toward the hallway. Footsteps echoed outside. And then someone knocked on the door. 3 sharp knocks. A serious voice spoke from the hallway. "Federal Financial Investigation Unit. We need to speak with Arthur Thorne immediately." Arthur slowly turned toward me. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. The story was about to get much bigger than revenge. For a moment, no one in the boardroom moved. The knock on the door echoed through the quiet room again. Federal Financial Investigation Unit opened the door. Chloe's face had lost all color. Arthur looked like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. My hands rested calmly on the table, but inside my heart was beating slowly and heavily. Mr. Vance walked to the door. He opened it. 2 men and a woman stood outside. They wore dark suits and serious expressions. Each of them held folders filled with papers. The woman spoke first. "Good afternoon. We are investigators from the Federal Financial Investigation Unit. We are here regarding suspicious financial activity connected to Thorne Manufacturing." Her eyes moved across the room. Then they stopped on Arthur. Arthur Thorne. Arthur tried to straighten his tie. Yes. The investigator stepped inside. Mr. Thorne, we need to ask you several questions regarding large financial transfers made through Thorne Manufacturing over the last 3 years. Chloe grabbed his arm tightly. Arthur, we should call a lawyer. The investigator looked at her calmly. That would be wise. Arthur glanced around the room, at the board members, at the documents on the table, at me, and I saw something in his face that I had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Mr. Rivers spoke carefully. Officers, this meeting was called because the majority shareholder just became aware of the situation. The investigators turned toward me. The woman stepped forward politely. And you are? I answered quietly. Eleanor Thorne. Her eyes moved to the documents on the table, majority shareholder of Thorne Manufacturing. She nodded slowly. Then she looked back at Arthur. Mr. Thorne, it appears the company's leadership was not fully aware of the transactions made under your direction. Arthur suddenly raised his voice. This is ridiculous. These were business investments. The investigator opened her folder. Investments that moved over $80 million into offshore accounts connected to shell companies. The room went silent. 80 million. Even the board members looked shocked. Arthur pointed toward Chloe. She handled those connections. Chloe stepped backward quickly. Do not drag me into this. Arthur stared at her. You told me those investors were legitimate. Chloe's voice became sharp. You signed every transfer. The investigators exchanged a glance. It was clear they had heard this kind of argument many times before. The woman investigator spoke calmly. Mr. Thorne, we would like you to come with us to answer questions. Arthur's breathing grew heavier. Am I under arrest? Not at this moment, but we strongly recommend your cooperation. Arthur looked at me again. Eleanor, you planned this. I shook my head slowly. No, Arthur, you planned this. You made those decisions. You signed those papers. You moved that money. I simply showed up today. The truth had been waiting for you. For the first time in years, Arthur had nothing to say. The investigators stepped closer. Mr. Thorne, please come with us. Arthur looked around the room. At the board, at the employees outside the glass walls, at Chloe, but Chloe had already stepped away from him. He walked toward the door slowly. Before leaving, he turned back toward me. 40 years, Eleanor. 40 years, and this is how it ends. I looked at him quietly. No, Arthur. This ended the day you decided I was worth nothing. The investigators escorted him into the hallway. Chloe stood frozen in the doorway. Her confident smile was gone. She looked small now, angry, afraid. Mr. Vance spoke firmly. Ms. Bennett, your communications with those investors will also need to be reviewed. Chloe quickly grabbed her purse. I want a lawyer. That is your right, the investigator said. Chloe looked at me one last time. You think you won? But all I saw in her eyes was panic. She hurried down the hallway after Arthur. The door closed and suddenly the boardroom was quiet again. Mr. Rivers let out a long breath. Well, that escalated quickly. Several board members nodded. The elderly man smiled gently at me. Mrs. Thorne, you just saved this company. Saved it? He nodded. If those transfers had continued much longer, Thorne Manufacturing could have collapsed. Thousands of employees could have lost their jobs. I looked down at the table. I had come here thinking about revenge. But the truth was something different. My father had not given me power to destroy people. He gave me power to protect what was right. Mr. Vance spoke again. Mrs. Thorne, there is one final matter. Yes? With Mr. Thorne under investigation, Thorne Manufacturing currently has no acting CEO. Everyone in the room looked at me. My heart skipped. You are the majority shareholder, which means the final decision is yours. I thought about that for a moment. Running a company was not something I had ever dreamed about. I had spent my life raising children, cooking dinners, helping neighbors, living quietly. But something had changed inside me. I looked around the room. How many employees does this company have? Mr. Rivers answered. Just over 3,000. 3,000 people with families, with children, with lives connected to this company. I nodded slowly. Then I spoke clearly. Mr. Vance. Yes, ma'am. You have been on the board for 20 years. That is correct. And you tried to warn people about these financial risks. He nodded. Yes. Then I believe you should serve as temporary CEO until the investigation is complete. The board members exchanged approving looks. Mr. Vance looked surprised. Mrs. Thorne, are you certain? Yes, but I will remain involved as owner and I want full transparency from this company moving forward. The elderly board member smiled warmly. That sounds like wise leadership. For the first time that day, I felt something lighter in my chest. Not revenge. Peace. The meeting slowly ended. Board members shook my hand respectfully. Employees outside the boardroom whispered as I walked through the hallway. Word had already spread. By the time I reached the lobby, several workers were watching me with curious eyes. Not with fear, not with pity, but with respect. I stepped outside into the warm afternoon sunlight. Just 24 hours earlier, I had been sitting on a park bench with nothing but a suitcase. Now everything had changed. But something even more important happened later that evening. My phone rang. It was my son, Julian. His voice sounded small. Mom, can we talk? I sat quietly on a bench outside the building. Yes, Julian. I am sorry. Those words came out slowly. I should have stood up for you. I should not have stayed quiet when Dad treated you that way. I listened without speaking. Then he said something that made my heart soften. I was wrong about you. You were never weak. Tears filled my eyes. Sometimes it takes losing everything for people to finally see the truth. We talked for a long time that evening. Not about money, not about the company, but about family, about mistakes, about second chances. Later that night, I returned to the bank. Mr. Sterling welcomed me warmly. Ma'am, we have prepared a list of your properties and accounts. I smiled gently. Thank you. But there is one thing I want to do first. Yes, ma'am. I want to create a foundation. A foundation. Yes. To help older women who are abandoned or left with nothing. Women who sit on park benches wondering how their lives fell apart. Mr. Sterling nodded respectfully. That is a wonderful idea. I signed the first papers that night, and as I walked out of the bank I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Hope. My father's voice echoed softly in my memory. Money can protect you, but dignity protects your soul. He was right. Arthur lost everything because he forgot that lesson. But I gained something far more valuable. My voice, my strength, and the courage to stand up when the world thinks you are powerless. So if you ever feel like life has taken everything from you, remember this. Sometimes the moment you think you lost everything is actually the moment you discover what you truly own. And if this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment right now to like the story. Leave a comment telling us where you are listening from and subscribe so you do not miss the next story.